Hi, I'm Skak. I'm the developer of Ashes Live, and today I'm going to walk you through Raven Rules, which is a complete drop-in replacement for the official FAQ that is compatible with the core rulebook. The main goal of Raven Rules is to make the game respect the card text as written. So it changes how effect resolution works so that you can actually read the card, do exactly what it says on the card, and that's how things go. Because the official rules, unfortunately, oftentimes you read the card and then you do exactly opposite what it says, or at least in the opposite order. So without further ado, let's get right into it and do a few examples. So, excuse me too in advance if I start having a coughing fit. My son brought home an illness that I have not quite gotten over. In any case, here's our first example. So we have two players, player 1, player 2, active dice, and some units in play. Player 1 decides to play our favorite card for examples, Meteor. Now, Meteor states, deal 2 damage to all units. For each unit, place 1 exhaustion token on that unit unless its controlling player spends 1 basic. Now, under the official rules, the way we would resolve this is we would deal damage to all units simultaneously. However, we would not resolve that damage because the card has other effects. We would first resolve the other effects. So for each unit, we don't have any magic over here, so he exhausts. Over here, we could spend 1 to not exhaust him, but we're not going to. We're going to let that exhaust 2. At this point, we've done everything on the card, so then we resolve all the damage. So 2 damage goes on Leech Warrior, and 2 damage goes on Frostfang. But Frostfang has an ability, Rapid Healing. When this unit would receive damage, you may spend any number of basic symbols. For each symbol spent, prevent 1 damage. So this player decides they want theirs in play, prevents all the damage. Bada bing, bada boom. Raven Rules work a little bit differently, because in Raven Rules, everything resolves in order, in the order that it's printed, and if triggered effects can interrupt, excuse me, triggered effects can interrupt the card that triggered them. So in this case, the interruption thing isn't really a big deal. But what this effectively means is that Raven Rules work exactly like the normal rules do for damage and destruction resolution, but for everything. Because the official rules have this weird disconnect where you can interrupt damage and destruction resolution and then resume it, but everything else happens in full before you do anything. So that's weird. In any case, so under Raven Rules, what we would do is they play Meteor. And then, although this is a simultaneous effect because it's damaging all units, we still resolve it 1 at a time. Now, and the order is up to the active player. So the difference there is that instead of sort of activating everything and then deciding which order it resolves, we activate 1 at a time and resolve as we go. So in this case, the active player says, I'm going to damage Leech Warrior first. So deal 2 damage. Leech Warrior receives 2 damage, at which point its ability triggers. When this unit receives 1 or more damage, you may spend 1 die. You may select 1 die in a target player's active pool and place it in that player's exhausted pool. So that's great. We received damage. We're going to do that. We'll exhaust this die over here. Leech Warrior gets his damage. We move on. We're still dealing 2 damage to all units. Frostfang's up next. So 2 damage is dealt to Frostfang. This player no longer has the dice necessary to heal it because it has a life value of 1. So Frostfang bites it. But they keep their die. Excuse me. Finally, for each exhausted unit, we place exhaustion. We can't pay for it, so Leech Warrior gets his exhaustion. And that's the state of the game under Raven Rules. So, in this case, it's pretty different because Meteor is crazy under the normal rules, quite frankly. Most of the time, though, things resolve pretty similarly, especially because no one plays Frostfang and few people play Leech Warrior. So, in any case, there's a basic example of things resolving in order and doing them 1 at a time. Another important thing to note is that when you are resolving stuff, you do all of it after it's been activated. So in this example, we have 2 cards. We've got Flash Archer for player 1 with a single wound token on it, leaving it with one life left. And then over here, we have a Living Doll on the opponent's side. Living Doll states, whenever this unit receives damage, you may spend 1 to inflict X amount of damage to a target unit or Phoenixborn, X being the damage received or its life total. So we'll give them a dice there. That would be helpful. So this is the main player. They spend their side action and exhaust this to deal damage. The end result is going to be identical under both Raven rules and the official rules, but the way you resolve this in Raven rules is that you deal 1 damage to a target unit, so we'll deal our damage to the living doll. This unit receives damage, they spend 1, and they inflict 1, or they deal 1 damage, because inflict, it means deal. That's an official errata as well under Raven rules, so they deal 1 damage back to the Flash Archer. Now at this point, the Flash Archer's ability is still sort of interrupted, so we're going to stick her on her side so that we remember that. So 1 damage is dealt, it resolves, Flash Archer gets killed. However, her ability was already activated, so we're going to actually turn her all the way around to show that she's now officially in the discard pile, but her ability is still reacting, or is still resolving. So the next part of her ability is deal 1 damage to a target unit. Excuse me. So she'll deal another damage over to the leech, the living doll. Living doll can't do anything about it. So the end result there is identical. It's just that under the official rules, she would have dealt both damage, and then living doll would have activated. It doesn't matter in this particular instance, but it can matter depending on what cards you've got going. Okay, so finally, an example showcasing the difference is that another difference. So here we have a summoned turtle guard and 2 lucky rabbits on the field. So our player says, all right, I'm going to summon a turtle guard. They spend 3, and then we get to lucky rabbit's ability, which reads, when placing 3 or more dice in your exhausted pool, re-roll them. If you roll 1 or more power symbols, you may return 1 of those dice to your active pool on its basic side. Luckstream cannot be used to return more than 1 die each turn. Excuse me while I take a drink so I don't cough all over you. Luckstream under the official rules is weird. So, because we've got a simultaneous event, they've got the same trigger, we would, under the official rules, we activate them both. And then the active player decides which order to resolve, so we'll resolve this one's first. Roll our 3 dice. For the sake of argument, we're going to say we rolled a power symbol. So that allows us to place 1 die on its basic side in our active pool. However, we already activated this guy, so he is going to resolve next. And the way we do that is we re-roll the same 3 dice, including the one that's in the active pool. And again, for the sake of argument, we're going to roll a power symbol. We re-roll this one, and we roll a class. Now what happens here, we cannot use it to return more than 1 die, so the power symbol doesn't matter, but this one, which was already in our active pool, stays on its class side. Now, I don't know about you, but I think that's pretty strange and hard to wrap your head around. Under Raven rules, it works differently because activation and resolution are sequential, or rather, they're tied together. They don't separate out like that. So under Raven rules, we spend our 3 dice, we activate our first lucky rabbit, we roll, we get our power symbol, 2 of them in this case, we put 1 die on its basic side in our active pool. At this point, we say, okay, we're back to our trigger, which was placing 3 dice. We could activate this normally, except we've already placed a die, and it says you cannot use it to place more than 1, so it doesn't activate at all. And here we are left with our turtle guard in play and a single die in our pool. All right, so that's the simultaneous thing. Another thing to note is that when you're resolving simultaneous effects, because the order that you activate them in now matters, what happens is that the first player activates and resolves any number of things based on the current trigger, and then clockwise around the table, the rest of the players get to as well. So that effectively you get the same result, but since it's all activated and resolved and activated and resolved and activated and resolved, the actual resolution isn't all confusing in the end. All right, so the next big change, aside from activating and resolving things immediately, is cancels. So here we go. one of my favorite examples of cancels is Rin's Fury. That's technically in their hands, so we'll put that upside down. So Rin's Fury says, you may select up to 5 dice in your exhausted pool, re-roll them, and place them into your active pool. You may spend any number of frogs just rolled to deal that much damage to a target unit or Phoenixborn. So we've got our 3 dice. We spend it to play Rin's Fury. Under the original rulings, we pay our cost, we specify our targets, and then we resolve our effects. So the way this would work is that we've paid our cost. We say, okay, I might want to target some unit on your side. At that point, player 2 says, well, you targeted something. I'm playing Angelic Rescue to cancel all effects. Rin's Fury goes away. We've lost all our dice. So that's a 3-for-1 trade there if you're keeping track. Raven rules are slightly different, because under Raven rules, all cancels with the exception of Choke have received a bit of errata, and the errata is when the cancel says cancel the effects, now it says cancel all remaining effects. So let's see this in action. Player 1 plays Rin's Fury. They pay 3, and then they immediately start resolving the effects. So they first select their 5 dice and they re-roll them. For the sake of argument, we're going to give them 2 frogs. And then they get to their next bit. You may spend any number of frogs. They say, yeah, I want to spend my 2 frogs. So they spend the 2 frogs, and they say, I'm going to deal 2 damage to your target unit. And now, at this point under Raven rules, the other player says, nope, canceled. Now, since we're canceling all remaining effects, that means Rin's Fury doesn't deal any damage, since that relies on targeting, gets discarded, but they get to keep their 3 dice that they re-rolled, and they lose the 2 frogs that they spent on Rin's Fury. So you might be saying to yourself, oh no, cancels are nerfed. And that's true in some cases, like this, where they actually get the benefit from Rin's Fury, or at least some benefit, whereas before they would lose the whole card. However, they're also buffed. Take, for example, Blood Chains, which says sacrifice a unit if you do, add exhaustion to an opponent's unit. If they cancel Blood Chains, the unit remains sacrificed, because that effect resolves prior to the targeting. Okay, one final example for cancels. Canceling remaining effects also applies to effects that hit multiple things at the same time, or would be simultaneous otherwise. So here we have Crimson Bomber. Pay a side action, destroy this unit to place 1 wound token on up to 3 target units. So under the official rules, we would pay our side action, we would specify 3 targets, say Dread Wraith and 2 others, and then the opponent would say, oh no, I have a Golden Veil, I'm going to cancel that card. When that cancels, it cancels all effects, so the Crimson Bomber does not get destroyed. Under Raven rules, instead, what happens is we pay our side action, we immediately destroy the bomber, and then we say, okay, my target units are my Dread Wraith, so it gets a damage, and then the second one is your unit, at which point our other player says, nope, Golden Veiling it, cancel all remaining effects. That means the Golden Veil's gone, the Crimson Bomber's gone, we're left with the Dread Wraith who keeps his damage. So that's cancels. They cancel remaining effects, and since effects are resolved sequentially, it works a little differently. All right, so those were the major changes, but we also have a couple quality of life changes that are worth pointing out. So first off, in this example, we've got Mayoni Viper, who has a battlefield of 3. She currently has a Silver Snake and a Gilder on her board. So her opponent destroys the Gilder. Under normal rules, the Gilder is now destroyed, but it still is in play, because the official ruling is that you cannot activate something on a card unless it's in play, barring like Between Realms or whatever. So the Gilder's in play. We activate its inheritance ability, which is when this unit is destroyed, you place a status token. All right, that's great. We put a status token on our snake. We also have in our hand Summon Sleeping Widows. Play this when a unit you control is destroyed. Place up to 2 Sleeping Widow conjurations on your battlefield. Unfortunately, we have a battlefield of 3. The Gilder, while destroyed, is still taking up a slot, so we only get 1 Sleeping Widow. So sad, Mayoni. And now the Gilder's gone. Raven rules work a little bit differently. Under Raven rules, When a card is destroyed, it's immediately removed from play. So we still have the stipulation that you can't activate an effect unless it's in play, but there's an exception to the rule, and that exception is if the card has a is destroyed or does leave play trigger, in which case you can resolve that effect when it's out of play. So under Raven rules, the Gilder gets destroyed, it immediately leaves play, resolve inheritance, place our status token, pay Sleeping Widows, and we, in this case, we get 2 because the Gilder is not taking up a battlefield slot, so now Meoni is back to full. So yay, Sleeping Widows works the way you think it would. Finally, the last thing to point out is Anchornaut. So Anchornaut says, during your turn, you may place 1 exhaustion token on this unit to deal 1 damage to a target unit. Anchornaut, for a very long time, under the official rulings, did not have any restrictions. You could do it basically any time, interrupting everything, and it was horrible for effect resolutions because it just makes the whole thing confusing. The latest FAQ version 3.0, actually does restrict it. You can still do it anytime on your turn, except not when you're resolving damage, and not during combat, except between combat steps. So Raven rules, the change is pretty simple. This affects Anchornaut, Mark of the Red Flower, and Chant of the Dead, because they all are this. So the Raven rule is, if a card has an effect that does not require a main, does not require a side, and does not have a triggering condition, you may only activate that effect between, or before, or after core framework events. And a core framework event is defined as a game step in the core rulebook that is a top-level bulleted or numbered item. In practice, what this means is that since these are all limited to the player's turn, you can do it before or after a main or a side action, or between combat steps. So after declaring attackers, after declaring blockers, after declaring a guard, before or after resolving damage. It can't interrupt the damage and destruction resolution process, and it can't interrupt card resolution, because those are all main and side actions. And that's it. And that's Raven rules. So I hope you try them out. If you've ever been frustrated by the sort of the vagaries of the official rulings, I think you might really enjoy Raven rules. You can find the complete Raven rules rulebook on Ashes Live. It's on the homepage in the sidebar. And if you do play a few games, I would love to hear what works and what doesn't. So that's it. I hope you enjoy Raven rules, and I'll see you in the game.